evening, everybody, and thanks for coming out tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to let you know about the work that we do when we're faced with these police use of deadly force investigations. It's very timely, obviously. I think we can all understand that. For weeks now, people around the country have been marching and protesting the current system. But as both our governor and our mayor have both said recently, what exactly constitutes reform is unclear. So I thought it would be helpful if we came together, and I'm so happy that Jeff and his fellow clergy members were able to pull this together on such short notice, and we got such a great turnout, to explain to you how the quote-unquote system works when we're faced with these type of investigations. This is an issue, as I mentioned, that is grabbing the national consciousness right now, but it's an issue that I've been grappling with for my nearly 13 years as district attorney. My purpose here is not to defend the current system. My purpose is, however, here to show you how we do it. You've heard some of that tonight by Superintendent Myrna. But also to explain to you the significant reforms that we've implemented over the last decade. They have not grabbed a lot of media attention, but they are meaningful, and they make our approach unique, I believe, in the United States. What you're going to see is noteworthy for a couple of reasons. First, there are not two systems of justice here in Boston, not one for the police and one for everybody else. How we investigate police use of deadly force is identical to the way we investigate homicide in our city. Second, there is a level of transparency here that I introduced more than a decade ago that most people find astonishing. Maybe you will too after the presentation. That transparency that we employ here in Suffolk County, not just in Boston, but in Suffolk County, is a great motivator for investigators who work on the FIDIT team. It's a leveler of rights, and it's a guardian of the truth. So I'm going to run through what I hope is an informative presentation for you, and at the end, Superintendent Myrna and myself and others, I suppose, will be available as long as you want for us to answer questions. So in the spirit of that, let me get things going. Maybe I'll take this off as well. So I've entitled my presentation, How Police-Involved Fatalities Are Investigated in Boston. First, let's have a 10-year review since 2004. So in the past decade, there have been no fatal shootings of unarmed individuals by the Boston police. Not one. There has not been one fatal shooting of an unarmed individual by the Boston police. Let me give my presentation. Maybe you can enlighten me and let me know who that individual was. In every case that officers drew their weapons and fired only after they were presented with an imminent threat of death or serious bodily injury. That's the legal standard for self-defense. There's another one over there if you want to take a look at that. There have been 8 fatal shootings by Boston police in the last decade. All of the deceased were armed. 6 of the deceased had loaded firearms. All of them who had loaded firearms pointed them at the police. 5 of them fired at the police. 3 police officers were actually shot, struck with gunfire. 1 of the deceased attacked the officers with a knife in each hand. The officers had responded to a domestic violence call. When they got to the apartment, the victim of that assault was cowering in the corner when they were confronted with the individual in close quarters. In the apartment, he attacked them with 2 knives. 1 of the deceased had a replica firearm. He had threatened suicide. He was very despondent about his family's finances. And when the police got there, they responded to a 911 call that he was waving a firearm. When he got there, he actually jumped in one of the police cruisers and went off with it. That caused a chase to occur, and ultimately that cruiser crashed. The officers surrounded the vehicle. He pointed that gun at the officers, and they fired their weapons. That was the weapon that he pointed at the officers. The manufacturer described that weapon as the PT-80, looks and feels like a standard high-powered pistol. So how do we reach the conclusions in those 8 cases? In none of those cases were the officers charged with homicide or any other crime. How do we reach those conclusions? Well, let me start off by explaining to you what my role is and what my responsibility is under Massachusetts state law. Under Massachusetts state law, and it's pretty much this way in every part of the United States, but here in Massachusetts, the Suffolk County District Attorney has the duty and the authority to investigate all sudden and unnatural deaths in the city of Boston, regardless of whether they involve the use of force by police officers. So any homicide, any sudden, unnatural, unexplained death, it's my duty and responsibility to investigate that. The district attorney or his law enforcement representative shall direct and control the investigation of death and shall coordinate the investigation with the office of the chief medical examiner and the police department in which the death occurred. Massachusetts General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 4. That's the law today. The district attorney, the 11 district attorneys, whenever there's any kind of unexplained and unsudden death, it's our duty to investigate that. So the law invests with the district attorney a special check on police power because we are independent of the we are independent of the police. This is the system that exists in the United States. If it didn't exist that way, I'd work for the police department, I'd work for the mayor. They'd tell me who to prosecute and for what. But that's not the way it works in Suffolk County, that's not the way it works in the United States. I'll give you an example. We handle about 45,000 criminal cases every year. We dismiss about between 15 and 18% of those cases. So the police officers arrested and charged about 15 to 18% of the people out of those 40,000, and we dismiss those cases. Not because necessarily they did anything wrong or they did anything sinister. We concluded that there just wasn't enough evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. But that's a check on police power. You know, the police can put handcuffs on you and bring you to court the next day, but then it's up to the district attorney to decide whether or not you will be prosecuted and for what. The district attorney's office is an independent agency. I'm elected by the people every 4 years. I don't respond, as I said, the mayor. I don't work for the mayor, I don't work for the police commissioner, I work for the citizens. And I'm accountable to those people on these matters. The process. It is an independent investigation. Our role, as I mentioned under the statute, is to direct and control the investigation. Now, where do lawyers work? I think you know, courtrooms and law libraries. I mean, that's where we do our best work and most of our work. But when an incident like this happens, there has to be some police agency that handles the on-the-ground investigation. And Superintendent Myrna laid out for you who that is in Boston, the Boston Police FIDIT team. As he also mentioned, and we're called out immediately, a senior prosecutor from my office is on the scene. At the end of that investigation, and we are intimately involved in that investigation, directing, controlling, advising on the law, suggesting certain things be done, certain things be followed up on and the like. We have a transparent presentation of those findings. The complete investigative file is released to the family of the deceased and their attorney if they have one, and they often do. Facts, circumstances, and key evidence is then presented to community leaders and stakeholders for review. Some of you have been in those meetings that we invite right after we meet with the family. And I meet with the family myself, personally. The complete investigative file is then open for media scrutiny. So the Boston Globe, the Boston Herald, and any TV station, news agency in America can come in and review our file, and they have. And they've spent days doing it. In every case involving the fatal use of force, as I mentioned, a senior prosecutor from my office is immediately assigned and is out there at the scene and to lead a full and fair and impartial investigation. They are tasked with determining the facts and circumstances of the incident and whether or not criminal charges are warranted. It's always going to be the chief of my homicide unit, the first assistant, the chief trial counsel, the senior counsel, or our deputy chief of homicide. Combined, I think they probably have about 120 years of experience as prosecutors. In Boston, I have chosen as my law enforcement representative a highly specialized and highly trained team of investigators known, as the superintendent said, the Firearms Discharge Investigation Team, often referred to as FIDIT. And these are the cream of the crop, I would say, the very best that the Boston Police Department has to offer in terms of its investigators. It's designed and deployed to investigate police-involved shootings, and the superintendent went over that with great detail. The majority of these investigators are drawn from the homicide unit. Since I have the statutory obligation to investigate sudden death, I insisted 10 years ago or so that I have a say in who was in the homicide unit. In fact, I just interviewed 3 young detectives today, and I recommended to the police commissioner that they join the homicide unit. So I have a say in who goes there. They're the very best that the department has to offer, I believe. They're known for their skills, their professionalism, and their integrity. But they always work under a senior prosecutor in my office. Why the BPD and why not somebody else? In Revere, in Chelsea, and Winthrop, if this were to happen, I designate a special unit from the Massachusetts State Police. But why not in Boston? Boston is one of the largest cities in the nation. It has the largest police department in New England, one of the largest police departments in the country. And if you travel around a little bit, not that I'm a worldwide traveler, but I've spoken to district attorneys all over the country, we really do have a highly trained and highly credible police department. They can bring, at a moment's notice, a very large number of detectives and uniform officers to a scene more rapidly than anyone else in the region. Why is that important? They can actually have hundreds of officers performing a canvass of the neighborhood, a line search, looking for evidence in a short amount of